I always believed my husband was the kind of man who would never lie to me. But then he started working late. Not once, not twice, but every single night. And the more excuses he gave, the more the doubts ate at me. Was he really at the office? Or was he with someone else? I tried to ignore the signs, the secretive phone calls, the way he smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, the way he avoided my eyes whenever I asked a simple question. At first, I convinced myself it was stress, that he was under pressure at work, that maybe I was just overthinking. But the voice inside me wouldn't stop whispering that something was wrong. And one night, when the lies became too heavy, I decided I had to know the truth. But before I could follow him, before I could gather the courage to confront the life I thought I knew, I need to tell you how everything began to unravel. My husband had always been a hard worker, the kind of man who took pride in providing for his family. In the early years of our marriage, he was present, loving, always home in time for dinner. We would eat together, talk about our day, and laugh at the little things. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I cherished it. But things changed slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a crack forming in glass that you don't notice until it spreads across the whole pane. He started staying late at the office. Just one night, he'd say, kissing my cheek before heading out the door. There's a deadline. But one night turned into two into three, and before I realized it, almost every evening was spent waiting alone. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that he was just trying to get ahead. But then I began to notice the little things that didn't add up. He came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his, at least not the one I bought him. Sometimes there was a trace of perfume, floral and unfamiliar, clinging faintly to his shirt. His phone became something sacred, always face down, always snatched quickly when it buzzed. He started locking it with a password I didn't know, and when I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying I was paranoid. But I wasn't laughing. The nights grew lonelier. I would sit by the window, staring out into the darkness, watching the streetlights flicker and wondering where he really was. Our daughter would ask, "When is Daddy coming home?" And I never had an answer. I'd force a smile and tell her he was busy, but inside doubt gnawed at me. The worst part wasn't just the waiting, it was the way he changed. His eyes stopped meeting mine. His kisses grew quick, perfunctory, more habit than love. When he did come home early, he seemed distracted, lost in thought, his phone buzzing at odd hours with messages he never explained. And still, I stayed silent. I told myself confronting him would make it worse. I told myself maybe I was wrong, maybe I was imagining things. But the signs became harder to ignore. One night, he came home later than usual, his shirt wrinkled, his tie loosened, and on his collar, faint but undeniable, was a smudge of lipstick. My heart sank into my stomach. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat. He brushed past me, muttering that he was exhausted, and collapsed into bed without another word. I stood there in the dark, staring at him, torn between love and betrayal, between fear and fury. That was the night I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. The silence was suffocating, the doubts unbearable. I had to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. So I made a decision. The next time he said he was working late, I wouldn't sit by the window waiting. I wouldn't cry into the silence of our empty house. I would follow him. And what I discovered that night was nothing like what I expected. The days after I made my decision felt heavier than ever, as if time itself was pressing down on me, daring me to confront what I feared most. I watched him carefully now. Every word he spoke, every glance at his phone, every excuse he gave. And the more I noticed, the more my heart twisted with suspicion. He had grown distant, not just in time, but in spirit. His laughter at home had vanished, replaced by silence or irritation. He no longer asked about my day, no longer played with our daughter the way he used to. It was as though a shadow had settled over him, and with it, over us. My friends began to notice the change in me. One afternoon, as we sat in a cafe, my best friend leaned across the table and said softly, "You don't look like yourself. Is something wrong?" I tried to smile, tried to wave it off, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. "He's been working late, every night, and I don't know if I believe him anymore." She frowned, her eyes full of sympathy but also a kind of cautious warning. "Be careful," she said. "Sometimes late nights mean more than work." Her words cut through me. echoing the very thoughts I tried so hard to silence. That evening, when he came home past midnight, I forced myself to look him in the eye. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed, irritated, as if the question itself was an inconvenience. "I told you I was at work." "We've got deadlines." He brushed past me, loosening his tie, not even waiting for my reply. I stood frozen in the hallway, my chest tight, my heart pounding. His answers were always the same, but his eyes betrayed something else, something he didn't want me to see. The signs piled up like evidence in a case I didn't want to solve. Receipts from restaurants I had never been to crumpled in his pockets. Missed calls from numbers he never explained. The faint trace of perfume clinging to his jacket, floral and unfamiliar, lingering long after he had left the room. And then there were the nights he came home without eating, claiming he wasn't hungry, though I had prepared dinner for him. Our daughter would sit at the table, staring at the empty chair, asking softly, "Is Daddy coming home?" And every time I forced a smile and said, "Yes, sweetheart, he's just busy," while inside I was breaking. The loneliness became unbearable. I would lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his key in the lock. When he finally came home, I would pretend to sleep, afraid of what I might see in his eyes if I looked at him too closely. And in those long, empty hours, my mind tortured me with images of him in someone else's arms, laughing the way he no longer laughed with me, holding someone the way he no longer held me. One night he came home later than ever, his shirt wrinkled, his hair slightly out of place. On his collar, faint but unmistakable, was a trace of lipstick. My heart dropped into my stomach. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. He brushed past me as though nothing was wrong, muttering, "I'm exhausted," before disappearing into the bedroom. I stood there shaking, tears burning my eyes, and for the first time, I admitted the truth to myself. I was losing him. Or maybe I had already lost him. The next morning, as I packed our daughter's lunch for school, she looked up at me with those innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, why is Daddy always gone?" My hands froze, the knife slipping slightly against the cutting board. I forced a smile, blinked back tears, and whispered, "Because he's busy, sweetheart, but he loves us." Even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, long after she had gone to bed, staring at the clock, the silence pressing against me like a weight I couldn't lift. I thought about every laugh we used to share, every promise we made, every dream we built together. And then I thought about how easily he seemed to let it all slip away. My chest ached with a mix of anger, grief, and desperation. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The doubts were eating me alive, and the only cure was the truth, no matter how painful it might be. So I made up my mind. The next time he said he was working late, I would follow him. I would see with my own eyes where he went, who he was with, and what secrets he was hiding. And deep down, I already knew. Once I discovered the truth, nothing would ever be the same again. The night I chose to follow him, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. He had left the house just after 7, kissing our daughter on the forehead, giving me a quick, distracted smile, and telling me not to wait up because it would be another long night at the office. But this time I didn't stay home. I grabbed my keys, slipped on a coat, and waited 5 minutes before pulling out of the driveway. My headlights dimmed as I followed the familiar curve of his car disappearing down the street. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, my breath shallow, every nerve in my body on edge. I told myself I was ready, that I needed to see the truth with my own eyes, but in reality I was terrified. Because once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. He drove the way he always did, steady and calm, no rush, no panic, as if he had nothing to hide. But instead of turning toward the highway that led to his office, he veered down a smaller road I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. This was it, my worst fears coming true. I stayed several cars behind, my heart racing each time he slowed at a red light, terrified he might notice me. But he never looked back. He seemed too focused on wherever he was going. The city lights flickered past as we drove deeper into an unfamiliar part of town, a neighborhood I had no reason to ever visit. The streets were quieter here, the shops closed, the sidewalks empty. And then, finally, he turned into a narrow side street and pulled into a small parking lot beside a plain brick building. There was no sign, no bright lights, nothing to suggest what it was. I parked down the block, killed my engine, and sat there in the dark, my hands shaking. I watched as he stepped out of the car, glanced around quickly, then walked toward the building with purposeful steps. My chest tightened. He wasn't heading toward an office, that much was certain. I waited a moment, then quietly slipped out of my car, keeping my distance as I followed him. The night air was cold, each breath clouding in front of me as my footsteps echoed softly against the pavement. I moved carefully, terrified he might turn and see me, but he never did. He disappeared through a side door, and I crept closer, pressing my hand against the rough brick wall for balance. The door wasn't locked. With trembling fingers, I pushed it open just enough to peer inside. What I saw made me freeze in place. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a bar. And it wasn't another woman waiting in the shadows. The room was small but bright, filled with shelves of books, boxes of toys, and colorful drawings taped to the walls. In the center, a group of children sat cross-legged on a rug, their faces lit with excitement as they listened to someone read aloud. And there he was, my husband, sitting among them, a book in his hand, his voice gentle as he brought the story to life. The children laughed, leaned against him, tugged at his sleeve, their eyes shining with adoration. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the doorframe, my mind spinning. This wasn't what I expected. Not at all. I stood there silently, hidden in the shadows, unable to move as I watched him with those children. One little girl climbed into his lap, holding a stuffed bear, and he smiled at her in a way I hadn't seen in years, soft, warm, full of love. My chest ached, but this time not from suspicion or betrayal. It was something else. Something I didn't understand yet. The man I thought was lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, wasn't with another woman at all. He was here, in this hidden place, surrounded by children who looked at him as if he were their hero. My knees felt weak as I stumbled back slightly, pressing my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. I wanted to run, to burst in, to demand answers, but something inside me told me to wait, to watch, to try and understand before I confronted him. Because whatever this was, it wasn't what I had imagined. And the truth I was about to uncover would change everything I thought I knew about my husband, my marriage, and the man I had begun to doubt. I stood frozen at the doorway, my breath shallow, my mind refusing to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. For weeks I had tortured myself with images of betrayal, with whispers of perfume and lipstick stains that felt like daggers in my heart. I had built an entire story of infidelity inside my head, convinced my marriage was unraveling in secret. And yet here he was, not in the arms of another woman, but surrounded by children who clung to him as though he was the only safe place in the world. My husband's voice was steady as he read aloud, every word carrying warmth, his eyes twinkling with kindness I hadn't seen in years. He wasn't distant here, he wasn't cold or distracted. He was alive, present, the man I had fallen in love with long ago. Tears welled in my eyes as confusion tangled with relief. Why hadn't he told me? Why had he let me drown in doubt instead of sharing this part of his life? The questions clawed at me even as I couldn't tear myself away from the sight. After the story ended, the children clapped, their little hands smacking together with pure joy. My husband laughed, that full, genuine laugh I thought I had lost forever, and ruffled the hair of the boy sitting closest to him. Then he closed the book and set it aside, listening intently as a young girl shyly showed him her drawing. He praised her, held the paper up as though it was a masterpiece, and the girl's face lit up with pride. My heart ached. These children weren't his, yet he gave them the kind of love and patience I had begged him to give our own daughter. I pressed my hand to my chest, torn between admiration and hurt. Why share this side of himself with strangers, but not with us? I lingered there until the children began to disperse, some picked up by guardians, others led away by volunteers. My husband stayed behind, stacking books, cleaning up crayons, helping a small boy zip his jacket. And then, finally, the room emptied until it was just him, standing quietly, lost in thought. I knew I couldn't stay hidden anymore. My legs moved before my mind caught up, and suddenly I was stepping into the room, my footsteps echoing against the floor. He turned sharply, his eyes widening when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, surprised, tinged with something like guilt. My throat tightened, my hands trembled, but I forced the words out. I followed you. The silence that fell between us was heavy, thick enough to choke me. His shoulders slumped, his jaw clenched, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then finally he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I should have told you. My chest burned, tears threatening to spill. Why didn't you? Why all the lies, all the late nights, all the secrets? Do you know what I thought? Do you know what I felt? My voice cracked, rising with weeks of pent-up fear and anger. I thought you were cheating on me. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. No, he said firmly, stepping closer. Never, God, no. That's the last thing I would ever do. His words were sharp with sincerity, but my heart wasn't ready to believe so easily. Then why? I demanded, tears spilling freely now. Why hide this from me? Why make me feel like I was losing you? He looked down, his hands trembling at his sides, and for a long moment he seemed to wrestle with the truth. Finally he whispered, because this is my past. This is me trying to make peace with the boy I used to be. I frowned, confusion swirling, but he went on. I grew up like them, he said softly, gesturing to the empty chairs and scattered toys. Alone. Forgotten. I spent years in a place like this, wishing someone would care enough to show up. And when I finally got out, when I built a life with you, I promised myself I'd come back someday. That I'd be the person I needed back then. These kids, they remind me of who I was. And I couldn't tell you because I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me as that broken boy. My knees weakened, my tears unstoppable now. All the suspicion, all the nights of doubt, all the pain I had carried dissolved into something else. Something heavier, but also lighter. He wasn't unfaithful. He was haunted. Haunted by a past he was trying to heal not with me, but through them. I stepped closer, my voice trembling. All this time, you thought hiding this would protect me? Protect us? He nodded slowly, guilt etched in every line of his face. I didn't want you to think I was weak. I didn't want our daughter to see me that way, so I kept it a secret. But in doing that, I hurt you. I hurt us. And I'm sorry. I stood there, shaking, torn between anger at his secrecy and awe at his compassion. I thought of the lipstick stain, the perfume, all the signs I had misread. My voice softened as the truth sank in. It wasn't another woman. He shook his head, stepping forward until his hands gently cupped my face. Never. It was never about anyone else. It was always about trying to give back, to be the man you think I am, even when I don't feel like I deserve it. My sobs broke free then, my forehead resting against his chest as he held me, his arms strong, trembling, real. For weeks I had feared betrayal, but the betrayal wasn't to me. It was to himself, hiding his pain, hiding his truth. And in that moment, in that embrace, I realized the truth I had been so desperate to find wasn't what I feared. It was what I needed to understand. After that night, nothing between us was the same, and I mean that in the best possible way. The secrets that had weighed down our marriage were gone, shattered by the truth he had hidden and the tears I had shed. For weeks I had believed my life was falling apart, that my husband was slipping away into the arms of someone else, but the truth was so much more complicated and somehow so much more human. He wasn't unfaithful. He wasn't cruel. He was broken in ways I hadn't seen, carrying a past he didn't know how to share and trying to heal it in the only way he knew how. And once I understood that, my anger softened, replaced by something deeper than pity. It was empathy. In the days that followed, he began to open up more than he ever had before. Late at night, when the house was quiet and our daughter was asleep, he told me stories of his childhood, of long nights in cold foster homes, of birthdays that no one remembered, of promises that were made and broken over and over. He told me how he used to stare out the window, praying for someone to come for him, and how that prayer never came. My heart broke all over again, not for me this time, but for the little boy he once was. And suddenly everything made sense. His need to provide, his long hours at work, his refusal to talk about certain parts of his past. It was all armor. Armor he had built to protect himself from the pain of being forgotten. Volunteering at the shelter wasn't about hiding from us. It was about finding the missing pieces of himself. But what he hadn't realized was that in keeping it from me, he was repeating the very pattern he feared most, shutting people out, even the ones who loved him most. So we made a new promise to each other, sitting there in the quiet of our kitchen with our hands clasped tight. No more secrets, no more hiding. If he was hurting, I wanted to know. If I was doubting, I had to speak. Because marriage wasn't about perfection, it was about honesty. And honesty, I learned, is not always easy, but it's always necessary. Slowly, he began to bring me into that part of his world. The first time he asked if I wanted to come with him to the shelter, my heart swelled with pride. I said yes, and when I walked through those doors, holding his hand, watching the children light up at the sight of him, I understood exactly why he had been drawn there. These kids didn't just see him as a volunteer. They saw him as a father figure, a protector, someone who cared enough to show up when no one else did. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was losing him. I felt like I was sharing him, not with another woman, but with children who desperately needed the kind of love he had to give. Our daughter came with us the next time, shy at first, but quickly swept up in their laughter and games. She painted with them, played tag, and when we drove home that night, she told me softly, "Daddy is a hero." My eyes filled with tears, and I glanced at him, seeing the humility on his face as he reached back to squeeze her little hand. In that moment, I realized how close I had come to destroying us with my doubts, how dangerous secrets can be, and how powerful the truth is when it finally comes to light. Now, whenever he says he's working late, I don't feel fear anymore, because I know where he is. I know who he's with, and I know why he's there. He's not running away from me. He's not betraying us. He's fulfilling a promise he made long before I ever met him, to never let another child feel as forgotten as he once did. And as his wife, I've learned to carry that truth with pride, not suspicion. Looking back, I realize how fragile trust can be, how quickly doubt can poison love, and how easily silence can grow into suspicion. But I also learned something far more important, that love isn't destroyed by imperfections. It's destroyed by hiding them. And when we choose honesty, when we choose to share even the painful parts of ourselves, love doesn't weaken. It grows stronger. My husband once worked late every night, and I thought it meant I was losing him. But the truth I discovered instead was that I had married a man who carried scars, a man who turned his pain into compassion, a man who didn't just love me and our daughter, but who found a way to love the forgotten too. And that truth, as hard as it was to uncover, became the very thing that saved us. Sometimes the answers we fear most are not the ones that break us. They're the ones that set us free.